So good afternoon, and thank you for joining our alumni panel discussion. My name is Kristen Kelly. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions and Coordinator for Diversity Recruitment. We are excited for you to meet our dynamic group of alumni who are here to answer all of your questions. This session is being recorded, and we encourage you to participate with your cameras on and your audio muted. You may use the chat or raise your virtual hand to ask questions. I would like to start by allowing our panelists to introduce themselves. Please share your name, where you're from, your undergraduate institution, when you graduated from the School of Law, and your current role as an attorney. Let's begin with Erin.
You'd think I'd remember to unmute by now, but apparently not. I'm Erin. I am an attorney at Wilder and Linneball. I studied undergrad at SUNY Geneseo, and I graduated from UB Law School in 2017.
And what do you do? What is your current practice area?
I practice litigation, so we do a wide variety of things, mostly civil defense litigation.
Wonderful, thank you. Laura?
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Groschadel. I'm currently a law clerk to Judge Eugene Fahey on the New York Court of Appeals. And I went to UB for undergrad as well as for law school, and I graduated UB in 2012, UB Law in 2012.
Great, thank you. Natalia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Natalia. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I also claim Providence, Rhode Island. I graduated from Roger Williams University, and I graduated from UB Law June 2020. And I'm currently a court attorney, also known as a clerk at the Appellate Division, 4th Department in Rochester.
Great, thank you. Alex?
Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Rowan. I went to UB for undergrad and law school. I graduated law school in 2019 now. I'm a third-year associate at Hodgson Russ in their business litigation group, doing all types of litigation from contract IP to insurance defense.
Wonderful, thank you. So the floor is now open for questions. Like I said, you can ask your questions in the chat, or feel free to raise your hand and wait for us to call on you, and then you can unmute and ask your questions. So I will get us started. Having been through the application process, what advice would you have given yourself before applying? And we can start with Alex.
Application process for like jobs or internships?
My apologies, for law school itself.
Law school. I think the important part to remember when you're applying for law schools is I remembered really struggling with the essays and your personal statements. You don't want to give law school something that you think that they want to read. They really do want to learn more about you, who you are as a person. And I found putting personal anecdotes in my statements and really writing about things that I cared about made my statements and my essays a lot stronger.
Great answer, thank you. Would anybody else on our panel like to chime in?
I can speak a little bit about that. I know one thing that I wish I would have done differently during the law school application process was just cast like a wider net with applications. Don't restrict yourself to like a certain geographic location just because that's where you're used to, like family is at. And I think that's one thing that I kind of focused on instead of more so looking into like the variety of different programs at other schools. I know it might be difficult to kind of know what you're interested in, but you might have an idea. So I think it might be helpful to kind of look into like what type of clinics are offered at different institutions. What are some of the professors currently doing? And that can also provide some help in narrowing some schools down.
Great, thank you. And I think this question, that answer segues into this question pretty nicely. Did you know what practice area you wanted to pursue when you started at UB Law, or is that something you discovered over time? Erin?
Sure. I definitely went into law school knowing that I was interested in litigation. I had done trial team at the high school or mock trial at the high school level in college and in law school. So I knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer. Now, that being said, what I had in my head as an applicant of what I knew I wanted to do and what I do now might be pretty different things. I think it's almost hard to know exactly what the day-to-day job of a lawyer looks like until you're actually in it and you kind of get your first internship jobs and get some experience under your belt. And so I say that out of all of my friends in law school, I think I'm the only one who came in with an eye towards this is what I want to do, and that's what I actually ended up doing. So I might be the odd one out here. And my advice would be if you know what you want to do and you end up loving it, that's great. But it's okay if you don't know exactly what area of law you're interested in. Get as much experience as you can, ask lots of questions, meet a lot of people who do different things, and you'll learn a ton.
Great. Laura, did you know what you wanted to do going into law school?
Not really. My background in undergrad, I did a lot of work with domestic violence prevention. That's what got me interested in going to law school in the first place. So when I was in law school, I gravitated sort of towards criminal law. I interned almost throughout law school at the Erie County District Attorney's Office in the Domestic Violence Bureau. And I loved that. I really enjoyed it. I was really interested in criminal law, but I did not really even consider clerking until someone in the Career Services Office encouraged me to apply for clerkships after law school. And now I've been clerking for almost 10 years now. I love it. I love the variety of work. I do both criminal and civil appeals, and the civil appeals span anything from slip and falls to complex commercial litigation. So I really enjoy that aspect of the job. I would say, like Erin, most of my friends in law school did not know what they wanted to do when they started. And one of the great ways to figure that out is to just take classes in different kinds of practice areas when you're at law school, see what interests you, what you gravitate toward. Another really great thing about UB is not only do they have, the summer internships where you could go into a particular law firm or nonprofit and see what you like to do. They also have clinics. The trial advocacy program is really great. So not only can you really kind of figure out what kind of practice areas you're interested in, you can also figure out things like, is litigation for me? Do I like being in the courtroom? Would I prefer to be on sort of like the business corporate side of things? Like there's so many different experiences. And whenever I talk to law students, I really encourage them to take advantage of those and really pay attention to what they gravitate toward. For example, I did an internship my 2L summer in DC doing policy work for a nonprofit, and it was an incredible experience. But I realized that the policy side of things was like a lot of administrative law, and it just wasn't for me. But I have friends who did a similar internship and loved it. So UB really gives you the opportunity to kind of explore not only practice areas, but different types of lawyering. And I really encourage law students to take advantage of that when they're in law school.
Wonderful, thank you. Alex or Natalia, if you have anything to add, feel free to unmute and just jump right in. If not, I'll continue to go on to the next question. So someone's curious to know what made you choose UB. Alex, thanks.
Yeah, I can hop in on that one. I talked to a lot of people before I made my final decision on where I wanted to go. I applied to, anywhere from UB to schools in DC out to LA. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And the best piece of advice that I was given is if you know where you want to work after you graduate, you probably want to go to school in that area. And with UB being the only law school in Buffalo, there were just extreme advantages to going to school here with internship, like interns with local employers. You get a lot of networking events, and you kind of get a one-up on other people who went away to school and want to come back to Buffalo, where you already know the people here, you already know the community, and a lot of the law firms here really like hiring from UB because they know what they're going to get. And usually they think that we're pretty high quality people. So that's very nice.
Go ahead, Natalia.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure someone was going to speak. Yeah, I kind of went about things the same way as Alex did. I kind of spoke to like some mentors, people that I knew that were practicing attorneys, and kind of just got input as to like UB or like any other school. And like for me specifically, there were a few things that drew me to UB. One was I definitely wanted to do like a joint degree program, and like UB was like one of the very rare like few schools that actually had like joint degree programs. So like I applied to a JD PhD program at UB and got in. And another thing that attracted me was like the professors and like what they were engaged in, not just like their previous employment, but a lot of professors were doing amazing things in the community. And that really drew me in because it kind of showed me like other ways that I can get involved besides just like being in law school. But also like the clinic. So I was really interested in the Civil and Liberties and Transparency Clinic. Like that's what kind of like drew my attention, and like all of the work that has been done in the past and like what the student attorneys were like currently working on. So like that drew me to it. So I definitely recommend you all to like look into the clinics that UB is offering because they're all doing amazing work.
I was going to chime in just to say that UB is also just really close to downtown Buffalo. So I know a lot of my friends, I chose UB in part because I grew up in Buffalo and my family was here. But it was really helpful to have that close proximity to downtown and where a lot of law firms are located. I know through law school, myself and a lot of my friends were able to work part-time at law firms. And for many of us that transitioned into our first law job, we started in law school and then branched out after graduation to go full time.
Wonderful. So how important is networking in law school? Can I start with Laura?
Sure. So I was not the best networker in law school. I wasn't, it was a little socially awkward. Still am sometimes a little socially awkward. For me, one of the things I tell law students who feel the same way about those networking events, and I know not everybody does. I had a close friend in law school who loved those events and was amazing at working the room. And now he's got, an amazing job, I think, at Microsoft now. So certainly if you're that type of person, that's wonderful. And the law school provides a ton of opportunities for those kinds of events. I still forced myself to go to those and talk to people, but it wasn't my favorite way of networking. I really think the other thing that people forget about networking is that one of the best ways to network is to do good work for the people that you're either working for or in the classroom. I got almost all of my letters of recommendation, my first job out of law school, the job I have now, because I just tried to do my very best work wherever I was at. And if you do that, and if you show up respectfully and professionally, people will remember you. So even if you're not the best, like I was, at working the room at these kind of networking events, yes, you should still go to them. But I think people underestimate the value of just trying really hard to do a good job in the classroom, at your internships. And people pay attention to that and people get noticed for that. So I think they're both important, but I sometimes try to remind people not to forget about that aspect of networking.
Yeah, I would say networking is super important for me. And I mean, as many of you will find out soon in law school, like you just don't have that much time also to network. So for me, I did network very intentionally. So like I just didn't go to any event just to go to it, but like if I would see maybe like attorneys or like people that I was interested in building connections with, like I would like do my research beforehand and make sure that I like had a conversation with them, got their business card, and then like make sure I followed up afterwards and like developed a relationship moving forward. So I think, yeah, definitely networking is essential, but if you are going to do it like with intention and just make sure that like you maintain that relationship as well. In addition to like what Laura said, which I completely agree with, I think that like people underestimate the value of like soft networking skills. And that could be something like as little as like networking via like LinkedIn. like, keeping up with like people's statuses or like whatever thing that they publish or whatever the case is. Or like group meets. I know like a bunch of different associations have like group meet chats now, and they kind of like conversate through there. So there's like different ways that you can network, and doesn't mean you have to like go to happy hour where you don't know anybody and have awkward conversations. So just kind of like figure out what works best for you.
I also wanted to jump in and say that UB's alumni network, both in Buffalo and in other cities, is really incredible. Almost everyone I know got their jobs, out of law school or their internships during law school, did so through powerful alumni networks. I mean, I will go out on a limb and say most of the practicing attorneys in Buffalo went to UB. I don't know if that's accurate, but it really seems that way. And as Alex was saying, they all know what quality UB students are. So the alumni are more than willing to sit down and have coffee with you, have you come in for a meeting and see what they do. Everybody is so willing to help. And I took advantage of that, not only in Buffalo, but when I was in DC, I had lunches and coffee with several of our alumni in that city to get an idea of what kind of work they do. And the alumni network is very, very strong, especially while you're in law school. There's just so many UB alums here, and all of them are really willing and happy to help law students find their first jobs, network, get their footing.
I also think there's a lot of different ways to network. I think everyone's hit home the point that networking is so important. I think I got every law job I've had through networking. But the last couple of years now have taught us that you don't have to be in a room in a sea full of people trying to make connections. I found over the last year, I've actually had some really meaningful conversations with people just one-on-one saying, hey, maybe we both start work at 9 a.m. You want to grab coffee and chat over Zoom for a half hour. And it's actually easier to make those connections, even though we're on a video call like this. You can kind of chat one-on-one. Nobody has to rush off to the office. It's a little bit easier. So don't be discouraged if there aren't as many in-person events. There's still lots of ways to network too.
Great. Thank you for those insightful answers. Can each of you name a specific experience that you had in law school that continues to impact your daily work life?
I have one, and I think Alex will laugh at this because we had the same legal writing professor. So you might get a kick out of this one. But you'll as a law student, you'll take legal writing, which if you don't know already, spoiler alert, lawyers write all the time. You're going to spend a lot of time writing, and you're going to learn how to write really, really well in law school. But I had a legal writing professor who had us. Well, at least she strongly urged us to have our documents read back to us, because you don't want to have a single typo when you send something off to the court, because you just don't want it. It's publicly filed. Your name's at the bottom of the document. You want it to be perfect. So I think there's a lot of things from legal writing that stuck with me, but that's one of them, that right before I hit send on my document to go to the court, I have it read out loud to me to make sure it's exactly what I want it to say.
Does anybody else have a moment that sticks with them?
I don't do trial work now. I never have, actually, but I did a lot of the trial teams in law school. I loved them. They're fantastic. The Advocacy Institute's amazing. They've got moot court, they've got mediation, ADR type stuff, but I specifically did a bunch of the trial teams, the traveling. You would travel to different competitions. It's a lot of work, but it's so much fun. And a lot of what I learned about advocacy, I learned through that group. And one of the things that they talked about, I had these, the coaches are almost all UB Law alums that volunteer their time. And it's a very intense schedule. But one of the things they talk about is telling a story for your case. So you want your case to have like a good story. You have to figure out what that story is, and then you have to build everything on that theme and that story. And I think about that a lot sometimes when I'm reading briefs, which is what I do basically all day. The cases that are really great, the writers that are really great, that really hook me in with their briefs, like they pick a story, they pick a theme, and they just sort of build on that theme. So it's a small lesson. It's a thing, I've learned so many lessons throughout law school about so many things, but that was something that I still think about when I read briefs today, when somebody really picks a really great theme for their case and carries it forward throughout their brief. And the trial team stuff is just so much fun. Even though I don't do it at all anymore, I had a blast doing it.
Great, thank you. Did any of you do a concentration? No, no, that's interesting. And did anybody participate in specific clinics? I know Natalia mentioned the transparency clinic. Did anybody else participate in clinics, and can you share your experience or externships?
I had 2 externships. I spent 1 semester as an intern at the New York State Attorney General's office. And that was an incredible experience because I think it's particularly the government internships, they really throw you in as a law student. So I think it was my second year of law school, and it was my first time responding to a motion for summary judgment. And thankfully I think we were moving. I had a lot of time to put together this motion. But that was just a really powerful experience to be a law student, but kind of be out there practicing to the extent, it was heavily marked up by my supervising attorney, but to have that experience learning how the process works and putting something together, it was just a really, really incredible time that I had there. And then my third year of law school, I was a student intern for Judge Arcara, who's a federal court judge in the Western District. And that experience was equally incredible. Just the opportunity to sit with the judge and the judge's law clerks and listen to how they listen to what's going on in the courtroom and how they read the briefs and what they look for and their approach to understanding the cases and making decisions. That still sticks with me every day, thinking, how would a judge look at this? How would Judge Arcara look at this? Am I arguing it the right way so that he might see my side for my client?
Yeah, I also did 2 externships while in law school, one for the appeals division at the Erie County District Attorney's Office, and then one as an intern for Judge Villardo, who's also a federal court judge. And working with Judge Villardo has really stuck with me because he is such a stickler for grammar, for spelling. He would nitpick every part of anything that I ever submitted to him, even more intensely than my legal writing professor did, which I found shocking. I didn't know that was possible, but he did. And it made me a better writer because now as an attorney, I read through my briefs before they're filed probably 10 times, which is excessive. But if you set it down and you come back to it 30 minutes later, a day later, you still find more mistakes. I'm kind of convinced that you can never file a perfect brief because you'll always go back and want to change something and make it better. But because of him, I feel like he really prepared me for the scrutiny that occurs by opposing counsel as an attorney and by the judges when they analyze your briefs, which was, I think it was a great experience.
Kristen, I don't know what it's called now. I know they changed the name of it, but I interned, I think it was called the Family Justice or Family Violence clinic when I was in law school, and they've changed the name of it now. But I did that all 2L and 3L year, and that allowed me to intern at the Erie County District Attorney's Office in the Domestic Violence Bureau, but earn credit doing that. So that was great because those internships are typically unpaid, so I could get credit, course credit while doing it. And through that clinic, I'm also going to forget the name of the visa that I worked on, but it was an incredible experience where myself and another law student worked on a visa for a woman who was a victim of domestic violence, but was getting a visa to stay in the United States and and in part because of, I forget the name of it, forgive me, but we worked with her very closely for a couple months, filed the paperwork under the supervision of our professor, and she got her visa, and that was just a wonderfully great part of the clinic experience as well. So the clinics are fantastic. I encourage you, if you're at all interested, you get really practical experience, and there's a wide variety of them.
And the name of that clinic now is the Family Violence and Women's Rights Clinic. Natalia, did you want to share about the work that you did in the clinic that you participated in?
Sure. So I was in the Civil Liberties and Transparency Clinic. I was specifically assigned to assist the Buffalo Police Advisory Board because they were in need of like legal research, more specifically about like bail reform. We were also discussing like the use of force policy that the Buffalo Police Department was like using at the time, and kind of like comparing it to like nationwide use of force policies. We were also meeting with like community members about like their experiences with police and like how can we improve police community relations and things like that. So it was both like community and also legal work, which I was very like passionate about, and I still am. So it was like a really valuable experience.
Thank you so much for sharing. In the chat, we have a question. Was law school everything you all thought it would be? It's actually a three-part question. And how did you all find the balance between law school and general life? And how did UB help you individually find that balance?
I guess I can start. I legitimately did not know what to expect out of law school, but I had fun with it. The first semester, I think everybody will maybe agree with me, was just hard. It's different than undergrad. It's a little, it's more intense. It feels like it's going to take you hours to read your homework assignments, where maybe in undergrad you could breeze through them or you didn't need to look at them necessarily, but in law school, you can get cold called, and it's very embarrassing when you do not know the answer and like someone else just immediately raises their hand. But after the first year, you really get comfortable. You get to pick your classes, you get to pick what you focus on, and it makes it more enjoyable because you get to do what you think you're going to want to do when you are a lawyer. So I definitely found that the first year of law school was rigorous. I probably overstudied. I was studying on the weekends. It was like a 7-day a week for a full semester. But by 2L and 3L year, I was able to realize how much time I needed for my work. I spent a little bit less time reading than I did as a 1L because you get used to the type of work that you're expected to do as a law student. So you learned that personal life to law school balance a little bit. And I was able to do all the fun things. I even got a black belt while I was in law school. I have my little belts hanging up here. So you can definitely have a life outside of law school, and that's carried over to being an attorney as well. And it kind of trains you for how you want to set boundaries as you move on past law school.
Natalia, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I had a very similar experience with Alex was saying right now. I think the first year overall was just an overall struggle, just kind of like, getting settled and like kind of figuring out what the professors were expecting of you, how to read strategically. Yeah, and just kind of like going through the motions it took me all year, to be honest. I do think that I had a really strong like support network my first year, and it was like my group of friends from law school, and some professors too, and like the staff. So I did get a lot of assistance and like just like moral support from everyone. As far as how UB helped me individually, like to balance that, one thing that I did love about UB, and specifically like the Student Bar Association, like they did not hesitate to host like networking or like social events. And for me, it was like, okay, like I might not go to like a few social events, but like if it was going to be put on like by the law school, like the SBA, like I would definitely go, just because I know we were all going to like join and like finally have that break that like we all needed. And I think in general, I feel like all of the professors and staff at UB I feel like once you come to them and you kind of like let them know like where you're at, like they're more than accommodating. So there were more than a few times where like I would approach a professor and say, hey, like I would appreciate it if you don't cold call me this week just because it's been a little bit rough. And they would totally understand that. So I think as long as you like communicate, like everyone's more than happy like to help you out.
I have a funny story for this one because I remember one of the first sort of seminars or classes. It wasn't a class, it was like a one-day thing, but I think it was during orientation for the first year of law school. I don't know if the law school still does this, but I think it was Professor Bartholomew who had a session on time management. And me, not knowing much what to expect out of law school, but knowing I was in the right place and I was going to do a great job, went into that seminar and said, I know how to manage my time. I don't need to listen to this. Like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I've made it this far. And I just kind of look back and laugh at that a little bit because I think we probably all agree that time management is just a huge part of being successful in law school and being successful in the practice of law. And personally, I think it's something that I'm always working on, like drawing the correct boundaries for myself. So I guess I would say two things. I think law school is a great opportunity to learn how to draw those boundaries and find out what works for you. But another way, in addition to having that time management seminar that if they still have, I urge you to take seriously. I also love that the law school had the 7th floor of the library is all completely quiet. And so one thing that really worked for me as a law student was when I walked into the 7th floor, it was 100% focus, 100% get my work done, because I knew that if I flipped a switch and focused, I could get the work done and then I could go have a life, but still keep up with my schoolwork as well.
Yeah, I guess I agree with everything everyone said. The first semester in particular is really hard. You're reading documents, opinions that it's a different kind of language, to be honest. And a lot of the classes, they start with like the first opinions from like the late 1800s, early 1900s. I promise you, judges try really hard not to write like that anymore. But it's just really hard. I remember thinking the first few weeks of law school, like, man, I don't know if I'm going to make this. And then law school was some of the best years of my life. Some of my very best friends today are friends I met in law school. You really do just figure out a schedule that works for you and you stick to it. For example, outlining for my classes really helped me. It doesn't work for everybody. So if it doesn't work for you, don't feel like you have to do it, but it did work for me. I would just take Fridays because I didn't have classes on Fridays. I would go to the library, I'd get a study Carrel, and I would outline for all my classes. And then I felt like, when I got ready for exams, here was my outline, my document that I could study from. It really helped me focus and summarize. And when you find that schedule that works for you, it takes a little while to figure it out. But once you find it and you stick to it, you really can have a nice balanced life. And I really had a great time in law school.
Great, thank you so much. Does anyone else have a question they might want to throw in the chat or unmute? You don't have to turn your camera on, but you're welcome to unmute and just ask your question. Can you tell us about your bar prep experience? Alex, can we start with you?
Sure. As I did with 1L year, I kind of took bar prep to the extreme. I did for the 10 weeks leading up to the bar exam. I mean, I studied every single day. Granted, 4th of July, I think I studied for like an hour just to make myself feel good about like myself for not taking a day off. But it wasn't overwhelming because it's a very structured system. Get a bar prep course. And really think about which one will fit you. There's always a huge debate every year about whether you're Kaplan or you're Barbary or you're Themis. And I did not like Themis because I think it was a little too independent and Barbary was a little too intense, where I thought Kaplan was really like nice in the middle and would fit my studying style the best. And I followed the program to a T. During the week, I would study I mean, it was like a 10 to 12 hour a day with breaks. I never studied straight through. I would take a lunch break. I would take study breaks at least once an hour to just clear my head for like 5 minutes. And then on the weekends, I would study for anywhere from like 3 to 5 hours and then still have my evenings free so I could go out and think about bar prep things. And I did exactly what I needed to. The bar exam itself was intense, scary, still like one of the worst experiences of my life, but I passed, so I didn't have to do it again. So I would just really recommend as you're going through law school, like pay attention to the 2Ls when you're 1L and the 3Ls when you're 2L and what they're talking about and what the themes are and what the courses are, because you'll learn from them and you'll learn what works and what doesn't work.
Thank you so much. Erin?
I just like to add one thing I wish I knew sooner, like when I was applying to law school, is if you are able to, whether you borrow a loan or you get a part-time job at some point over the summer and put some money away so that you're in a position to not have to work during bar prep. For me, that was huge because I don't think I studied as hard as Alex did, but it was a full-time job. The time that I spent studying for the bar, it was at least probably for the beginning half, it was at least 40 hours a week, like putting in a 9 to 5. But after the 4th of July, it was every day, a lot of hours. And I was thankful that at some point someone told me to, if you're able to set yourself up for that, to just really focus, put the time in, take the bar once, pass. That was just something I was glad to know, and I'm happy to share that with all of you. That said, you don't have to not work, but I was glad that I was able to put myself in that position.
Yeah, just to kind of like piggyback on what Erin said, I was someone that had to work throughout like my whole law school career because I had no other choice. But I knew for sure, like for bar prep, like that, for me specifically, that was not an option that I wanted to have for myself. So I did save up some money, whatever I could scrap up. But I also was very intentional about like applying to like a bunch of like bar prep scholarships, and there are a bunch available. I think UB also is very good at like sending out resources with like bar prep scholarships. I know some like bar associations also provide that, and I even know some like law firms that also provide that as well. Generally, my bar prep experience might be a little bit different than everyone else's just because I took my bar during the pandemic. And I did study for, I want to say like 4 or 5 months, which is not like, will definitely not recommend to anyone. I would say, it worked out for me because I love to study by myself, and that's just how I learn best. I can like sit in a room for hours and like just grasp the information. I know if you were like someone that likes to do like studying in groups, probably the pandemic bar might have not worked out. But I would say, I was very like intentional about having like a set schedule each and every day. And I did like plug in times for me to do like self-care. And that was usually like on the weekends, whether that was like a walk or like going for a run or just doing something that wasn't like me in my apartment, like studying. So I would say like for bar prep, definitely like take it seriously, be disciplined, but also like add in some time for you to take care of yourself.
I think that's all really good advice. And my schedule was very deliberately built in everyday time to, you got to stay sane during bar prep. It's a bear. It's awful. I'm not going to lie to you, but so like I would go to my classes in the morning, then at lunchtime, I would build in an hour for exercise and to take a break to eat lunch. Then I would go back and do, whatever the assignments were in the afternoon. I would take a break, eat dinner. If there was some other stuff after dinner, an hour or two, and then I would hard stop at, 8 or 9 o'clock, watch some TV or something like that. You've got to build that in during bar prep because otherwise, it's just too much. But the good news is you'll take all those really great time management skills that you've learned throughout law school and you will just use those. And then hopefully, it's 2 months of your life, it's done and you never have to do it again. That said, I work with some fantastic lawyers who failed the bar the first time. I know many fantastic lawyers who failed the bar the first time. It's not the end of the world. Obviously, you want to avoid it because you don't want to have to study again if you have to. But it's certainly not, 10 years into practice, nobody's going to care whether you pass the bar the first time or not. I promise you.
Great. And I think we have one more question, and it is, what is a typical work day like for each of you? Start with Erin, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. So I think the one thing I really, well, there's a lot of things I enjoy about practicing law, but I think there's some really nice benefit to being a professional that you can control your own hours a little bit to your benefit or to your detriment. You know, I kind of switch schedules from time to time. Sometimes I'm on a kick where I'm up super early, I go to the gym, and then I'm in the office at 7 a.m. because then I get to leave at 5 o'clock. And it's kind of nice if I, you know, pending no crisis, I can get my work done, get my hours in and go. Other times I might be in a track where I want to come in a little bit later and I end up working a little bit later because of that. But I guess that's kind of the hours, you know, you probably work, I probably work 9.5 or so hours a day if I had to think about it. You'll learn in law school that depending on the type of law you practice, I'm in a role where I bill my time. So a lot of the hours that I spend at the office is a product of how efficient I am with my time. So you get good at time management, you learn to be effective and get your work done so that you can get in, get your work done and go. I guess there's a lot to this question. I don't know if you want to know more about, like, I spend a lot of time at a computer typing. I do a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of writing. I'm happy to share more, but I feel like there's a million things I could talk about. So I guess I'll wait to see if there's something specific that everyone wants to know.
No, I think that's great. Alex, can you share what a typical work day is like for you?
Yeah. So my standard workday, I work best in the morning, so I like to get in between like 7 and 8. I like to get to the office before anybody else is here, so I can really sit down and get some like intense work done, thinking work. And I usually stay in the office until anywhere from 4:30 to 5:30. So it's about a 10-hour day, but I do that because my weekends are typically free. I usually don't have to work on the weekends if I really put in the time during the work week. I also am in a billable position where how productive you are, it's indicative of how much you're going to have to work that week. If I spend a lot of my day on Instagram, then I'm probably going to be working a little late some nights. But it's an ebb and flow. In litigation, there are some weeks where I'm at my computer doing research and writing all the time. But the past few weeks, I've had several client meetings where I'm meeting with clients on Zoom every single day. I've had depositions. I theoretically may be on trial in a month where I'm going to be in a courtroom for 8 hours a day and working nights to prep for the next day. So it really just depends, and it ebbs and it flows. I would say on average, I don't work evenings, and on average, I don't work weekends, which is really amazing and very nice. But there are times where you have to just put in a little extra work. But what your schedule is going to look like is very reliant upon what type of law you do and where you work, whether it's government versus public versus private. So if you don't like the idea of working 10-hour days, then I mean, you could try to find a job that's more 8 hours or even part-time flexible. Or if you don't want to be in an office every day, a lot of companies are now offering remote work where you can work from home some days as well. So I think that there's a lot of options. It's really nice.
Great, thank you. Natalia?
Yeah, so I'm a government attorney, so the majority of my time, I'm also doing legal research and writing. So the way that my clerkship works is I usually get my cases assigned the beginning or like towards the middle of the month, and I kind of know what are my deadlines, and I kind of figure out like my time management from there. There might be cases that might take longer than others, like for me to issue a report on. So I kind of have to figure out like which ones to do first, which ones to like do towards the end of the deadline. But yeah, for the majority of the part, my schedule, I also do begin my day pretty early because I try not to stay after 5. And if I do have to come in on a Saturday, I also don't want to stay after 5 either. But yeah, I probably start 8 a.m. I'll do the gym before that. And I try to be as productive as possible. Sometimes I'm not, sometimes I am, depends on the day. But for the most part, I am out of there by like 5, 6 the latest. There might be days, of course, that you have to work late, but that just kind of comes with the profession. And I think everyone kind of understands that. But yeah, that's sort of my schedule.
Thank you so much. And Laura?
So my job is very similar to Natalia's. I'm also a law clerk, and I structure my time essentially the same way. I don't bill hours, but I know sort of ahead of each term how many cases I'm going to have, what they're about. Sometimes I'll take a look at the record of the briefs and I'll see how big the stack is, and then I'll figure out how long it's going to take me to work on it, and then I'll set deadlines for each appeal for myself internally so that I meet my deadline for the session. I usually I get in a little later, usually between 8:30 and 9, but usually I work a little bit later as well. But that's one of the, as Erin said, one of the great things about being a professional is you can structure your day, really kind of the way you want. I just moved into a new house and we have a bunch of contractors, and I can read briefs at home if I need to supervise that. So it really depends. I mean, clerking, working for the government, but particularly clerking, you really don't have a whole lot of like emergencies. Like there's really not a lot of stuff that comes up that you're like not expecting. Like in litigation, you could get served with an order to show cause or something like that, where it's, okay, there goes your weekend. Although that doesn't happen all that often. But clerking is really more of a steadier job, and really, yeah, you're going to work nights and weekends sometimes, but that could be just because you have a really difficult case. So my schedule's pretty predictable. I do like that. And most of my days just spent research and writing. I read a lot of briefs, do a lot of research, and then I write reports and draft opinions.
Great, thank you. We have a question in the chat for Natalia. How did the PhD facilitate, enhance your career, and what field is your PhD in?
So I'm getting the PhD in sociology, and it was actually a really great experience to kind of go from like a sociology class to then like a crim law class, because that's like how I kind of started connecting like the two fields together. So for example, I kind of learned how a lot of the laws that we're learning in law school, like property contracts, crim law, crim procedure, how are they affecting like the actual community, but also how like the community themselves influence like the enactment of certain laws, whether that's like through legislation and things like that. That was sort of how I specifically connected it. I have heard of people that have done PhD in like political science, social work, and like other areas, and they still find a way to like connect law with their PhD. I did have a number of friends that got that also participated in the JD Masters of Social Work program, which is also a great way to like connect both fields. So it kind of depends on like what your interests are and like what you think you'll be doing after law school, because that could also kind of sway like what other program you might be interested in.
Great, thank you. They follow up with, is your dissertation committee with people from sociology and JD? How much extra time is the program? And is your dissertation look more like legal research or sociology?
Yes, I'm still forming my dissertation committee, and I am most likely going to have one of the professors from the law school that I took like a few courses with and actually developed a really great relationship with her. So I'm most likely going to have her on my dissertation committee, just because she also has research interest in the same areas that I'm planning to study. And as far as the extra time with the program, what I loved about the joint degree program was that both programs communicate with each other and we work very efficiently. So I was very adamant about not wanting to graduate from law school, having to take PhD classes. So what I did was my first year of law school, like I took all law classes, and then the second year that was supposed to be my law school year, I just banged out literally all of my requirements for the sociology program. And then I did have to just take an additional like law school year. So I did 4 years in total of like coursework. And then right now I'm just pretty much doing the dissertation committee proposal, and then I'm going to be defending it at some time next year. So as long as like you have both of the departments communicate with each other, and like you have like a point person, and you're like on it when it comes to like transferring credits, like I think it's like a bang for your buck. And as far as my dissertation, it's going to focus more on like sociology. So I'm looking more into not to take up a lot of time, but I'm looking into like different forms of like informal social control in like community. And that's like the sociological term for like different ways of like policing. So like in addition to like community policing, what are other ways that like we can have like protection and safety in like communities? So yeah.
Amazing, thank you. I have to say, Natalia, we have gotten so many questions this cycle about JD PhDs, and so we will be picking your brain some more about that later. So does anybody else have any other questions? We have about 8 minutes left. Feel free. If not, we'll wrap this up, and we'd like to thank our panelists for joining us and giving us their time and their wisdom. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And I think we're good with questions. Please reach out to the admissions office if you have any follow-up questions that you think of later, and we can direct them to any of our panelists for you. Thanks, everyone.